Hello, my name is Madeline Castleberry, and this is my first conference presentation for EDUC 7705. So, the curriculum scholar that I chose to research was John Dewey. And John Dewey is not necessarily a modern curriculum scholar, but you can still see a lot of his thoughts and theories and research and ideas and experiments in today's classrooms. He is a founder of pragmatism, which is something that is more on the progressive side of education. They're kind of searching for ways to develop experiences and experimentation in the classrooms and just overall how to get students learning by doing. That's the best way I know how to describe it is they're trying to get kids to learn by doing in the classroom and to kind of lean away from the idea of a sage on a stage, which is kind of what education first was way back when it first started. Was the teacher stood at the front of the room, they delivered facts and information, students wrote it down, and they were just chose to mirror it back to the teacher. And Dewey was someone who, and along with others as well, but he was someone who kind of fought against that and wanted to show that that's not how kids learn. Like it's not very progressive either. So his goal was to get into those classrooms and fix this idea of teachers being a sage on the stage and more so focused on the students experimenting and getting these experiences in the classroom that led to more growth, and not just academic growth, but intellectual growth as well. So here is a quick timeline of his life. This actually came from a lady who took the time to create a very, very detailed timeline of his life. Like some of the timelines even had a specific date of when he walked into a building to deliver a speech or something. So I kind of narrowed it down to the main points I wanted to discuss. I did not give a direct date for all the works that he has published and books he's published because we would be here all day, but I did give one. So yeah. So in 1879 is when he graduated from Vermont University, and he actually delivered their commencement day oration, which was titled Limits of Political Economy. And then in 1879 to 1881, he held his first teaching position in Oil City. He was an assistant principal as well as taught classics, sciences, and algebra. And then in 1884, he received his PhD from Johns Hopkins University, and he became a professor at the University of Michigan in philosophy. In 1885, he became a professor at the University of Minnesota. And then in 1889, 4 years later, he accepted the chair of philosophy at the University of Michigan. So he went back to the University of Michigan where he was studying philosophy. Or not studying, but teaching, sorry. And then in 1894, he accepts a position at the University of Chicago. Now, this date was very important because at the University of Chicago, him and his wife, Harriet, opened up what they called a lab school. And at this lab school, they were focused on researching his theories and ideas and practices in the classroom to show how it positively affected children and teachers. So him and his wife, Harriet, both did that. And then in 1895, he was appointed school counselor at Moline High School. And I think it's cool that he was a counselor because a lot of curriculum scholars and just overall famous names in education, a lot of them have a background in psychology. And it's because they've taken the time to not just understand how curriculum works, but understand how the mind works too. So they're able to combine the two. And I think that's why he was so successful in his ways as well. And then in 1902, The Child in the Curriculum is published. This is not his only book he published. He published a lot more, and I'll actually quote one of them later on in the slideshow. But he he published this one in 1902 called The Child in the Curriculum. And then in 1919, he founded the New School for Social Research, which is still a school today. It's in New York City. And it's basically a school where students can come in, researchers can come in, faculty, and they can research progressive ways in the classroom that they want to experiment with and ways that they can get new strategies implemented into the classroom. It's a very small school. I think I read online that there is only like 75 people on staff, but it is still there today. And the idea and the goal of it was to kind of follow in John Dewey's footsteps of making this progressive change in the classroom. And then in the 1920s, he lectured, and a little bit before the 1920s, I should say too, he lectured at numerous events on student interaction in the classroom. This is also the time where he traveled to multiple countries throughout the world to kind of implement some of his strategies as well. And I'll get into that later on in the slideshow. And then in 1930, he actually retired from teaching. So this is the significance of his research. And these are only 4 things that kind of stood out to me that I found to be the most significant. There is obviously a ton more, but the first one being that learning is a process of experimental growth. And this came from Holt. And she was just kind of summarizing some of his research. And she was just kind of saying his whole idea was to show that kids need to experiment in the classroom, because when they're experimenting, when they're out of their comfort zone, they're growing. They're not growing if we're just giving information to them and hoping that they can mirror it back to us. So that was kind of the first significance of his research, was just experimenting in the classroom and how that leads to not just academic growth once again, but intellectual growth as well. The second one was that the pragmatist prejudice is to affect the here and now and to look at life as a matter of present significance. So I actually liked reading this one because it gave more information on how he was very much someone who looked at the now. And in terms of a student, that meant don't look at the student's past. Don't let whatever the student did before keep them from learning what they are going to today, or don't think they can't learn it because of what happened yesterday, but use your time now in the classroom to experiment and to grow with them, to create experiences that they will keep for forever, and these skills that they will keep for forever. And then the third one is habit is a crucial concept in understanding human development. So this one actually leans more towards his side of psychology. He studied psychology, and he studied habits in terms of students and adults, so that he could understand what these habits were and what they meant and what they look like in the classroom. And he came up with, if you don't understand what habits students have or what those habits mean, then you're not going to be able to understand how to teach them. You're not going to understand how they are developing. And you got to know these things in order to help them grow. And then the fourth one, and this is probably my favorite one, is that educational experience is critical and stresses the importance of the social interaction processes of learning. So the biggest thing that comes from this is that students have to have that social interaction, and that it is just as critical for their development as is the academic part of it. So students in the classroom, if the only communication happening is the teacher talking to the students, and the students are either not talking back, or students are not having complicated conversations between them, just like we've had in this class actually, there's not a lot of growth happening. And although students may be able to kind of fire back those facts that they're supposed to know, and maybe dates and history they're supposed to know, that's not going to last. Like, that's just going to last for the test, and then they're going to move on. But the social interaction within students not only helps them understand and kind of take in the academics more, but it's helping them grow more as students, and it's helping them create and kind of master these what's the word I'm looking for? More critical thinking skills. That's what I'm looking for. It's helping them master those, and helping them master all these skills that they're going to need later on in life. So to me, that's the biggest thing, is to lean away from the teacher being the sage on the stage, and lean more towards students being responsible for their learning, and responsible for talking to each other, responsible for getting other opinions, and just overall working together in the classroom to experiment. This is my favorite quote from him. Education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. So I think this kind of sums up what he was for and what he stood for, that we're not just educating students to use these skills later on down the road, but we're showing them that this is life. You learn every single day, and you only learn by doing experiments, going through experiences, and just growing as individuals. Not necessarily, oh, I want them to learn these facts so that if somebody ever asks them later on down the road, they're going to know it, or I want them to master this standard so that in 2 years when they take this test, they're going to make a great grade. He was more so trying to get people to realize that education is life itself. Whether it's a school, kids are going to keep learning no matter what position or part of life they're in at the moment. So this is where I wanted to talk a little bit about how he traveled. So the biggest experiences that influenced Dewey, and even not only experience that influenced him, but places that he influenced, were Japan, Mexico, Russia, South Africa. And what he did is he went to these, either at the time democratic states or at the time were not democratic states and were trying to be. He went over there to try to take their education systems and transform them into what ours kind of look like and what he was trying to get them to look like. So he was not successful at all in them, but he was successful at a lot of what he worked on. He went, one of the biggest ones I read about in Holt was Russia. And he went over there and he really tried to get their education system turned around. But it turned out it was more of a political war over there than what he had wanted. So it depends on how you looked at it. From what I was able to read, you either thought he was successful or you thought he wasn't because politics got in the way. But either way, he tried to take these theories and ideas that he had and spread them out nationally for students and teachers to understand as well. So, and this is what he kind of did in the 1920s when he was kind of lecturing. He really, really took a point to experiment himself and to kind of get an influence from other schools around the world, because education is so different wherever you go. And this kind of goes back to his idea of experimenting. And that's exactly what he did. So, how does this impact my teaching? So, this is my favorite quote. I'm not going to read it word for word for you, but I found this very helpful as a teacher, because a lot of the times when you go to professional developments or you go to trainings or you're doing research, a lot of it is what the kids should be doing, what the kids should look like, what the kids should be saying, what the kids should be learning, what the kids' mastery should look like in the classroom. But this quote kind of summed up what a teacher should look like doing his theories and ideas. And to me, that was very helpful because I feel like I have a pretty good idea of what my kids should look like and should be doing in the classroom. But a lot of the times we neglect what we should be doing because we're too focused on what the kids are doing. But really, if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing and we're looking like the effective teacher that he mentions here, then the kids are going to follow suit. And just a couple of things he said an effective teacher should be doing is obviously be knowledgeable about the content, but also be open-minded to changes and to think globally. So you and I both know that there are going to be changes in education every single year, no matter what, whether it's curriculum or standards or teachers or admin, coaches, it's always changing. It's always changing. And he just basically said an effective teacher should be open minded to changes. Don't get so set in your ways that you don't ever change or you don't ever want to try a new strategy that could be very useful because you've done this for so long, it's been effective. You only want to do that. He just wants us to be open minded, because if we are open minded, then guess what? Our students are going to be too. Our students are going to be too. And when you're experimenting in a classroom, you have to be open minded. You know, that's the whole point of an experiment, is you're going to see what happens. Um, and he said that, you know, this is what helps foster growth in the classroom too. And another thing that stood out was collaborating with other teachers. And I've kind of talked about learn by doing, which is one of the PLC models through Solution Tree, which is very evident in all schools today. I want to say, especially mine, collaboration is key. Collaborating with other teachers is basically what keeps teachers sane and what opens the door to all these new possibilities and strategies. And I think that if Dewey saw our curriculum today, he wouldn't be happy with how curriculum is written, because there is this like a script that goes with it. But I think he would like to see and is seeing a lot of the collaborations that teachers are having in order to take the curriculum that we're given and open it up to more of an experiment and more experiences for students, instead of just the teacher telling the students what to do, students doing it on a paper and turning it in. So I think he would be proud of what he's seeing there. I think there still needs to be some changes with curriculum, but I think that side of it he would be proud to see. So And that came from Holt as well, which was a great article that I've also linked. So that is it. That's all I have for John Dewey. He is truly, the more I think about it, I think his strategies are more evident in the classrooms than I realized. And I hope to see more of them implemented in the future. So that's it. And here are my references.